It was a warm Saturday afternoon. I was in my kitchen, the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air, when my son, Gregory, walked through the door. I could see it in his eyes before he even said a word. Something was wrong. Something big. "Mom," he said, his voice shaky, "I need to talk to you." I set the bread down and turned to him, trying to prepare myself for whatever he had to say. "I can't do this anymore," he continued, not even looking me in the eye. "Susan's pregnant with a girl, and I want out." I felt like the ground had just been ripped from beneath me. A girl. He wanted a divorce because his wife was carrying a girl. I stood there, stunned, unable to wrap my head around what he had just said. I looked at my son, the boy I raised, and felt an emptiness in my chest. I couldn't understand how quickly everything was falling apart. Little did I know, 3 years later, I'd be faced with the biggest shock of all, and it was coming straight to my doorstep. Before we begin this story that might feel familiar, take a slow breath. Settle into your chair. Let the quiet of the room hold you, and allow the noise of the day to fade into gentle stillness. You're in a safe space here, a quiet world of story and strength. If you're joining from the United States, welcome. If you're watching from Europe, greetings to you. And to those from Asia, Africa, Australia, or anywhere the day is just beginning or the night has already deepened, I'm so glad you're here. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Please take a moment to like, subscribe to her Kindle Stories, and share this story if you believe in the importance of respect and setting boundaries, no matter your age. It helps this cozy little corner of our community grow, and it lets me know you'd like more stories like this one. I've always thought of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, as a perfect place to raise a family. It's not too far from the hustle of the city, but there's still a calm, peaceful feeling about it. The streets are lined with trees, and the houses are just enough to make you feel comfortable without feeling cramped. I've lived here for over 40 years, watched my children grow, and now I get to see my grandchildren run around these same streets. There's something comforting about that. My home, a small but cozy house on a quiet block, is where I've spent the majority of my life. It's a bit dated, sure, but it's ours. I've never minded that it's not the biggest house on the street. It's filled with love, and that's all I've ever needed. I've worked hard to make sure my kids had everything they needed, even if it meant making sacrifices. Gregory, my son, has always been a good boy. He's 35 now, a businessman, successful in his own right. He's always been driven, almost to the point where it feels like he has something to prove, though he would never admit it. He's proud of what he's achieved, but I can see how much pressure he puts on himself. His father, may he rest in peace, was the same way. I can't help but think Gregory inherited that sense of duty from him. Then there's Susan, my daughter-in-law. She's kind, gentle, and everything Gregory needed. They'd been together for 5 years by the time they found out they were expecting. I remember the moment Susan called me. She was so happy, her voice full of excitement. She told me they were having a baby, and I could hear the smile on her face. I thought it was the beginning of something beautiful, but the next time I saw Gregory, things had changed. I never expected what happened next. Gregory, the man I raised, the man I thought I knew, had made a decision that would shatter my heart, and Susan's. He wanted out just because their baby was going to be a girl. And from that moment on, everything changed. When Susan called me that afternoon, her voice breaking with each word, I knew something was terribly wrong. "Mom," she said, almost choking on her tears, "Gregory wants a divorce." I remember feeling like the world stopped for a moment. Divorce? What do you mean divorce? The question kept repeating in my head. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. They were happy just a few weeks ago, planning for their future, excited about the baby. What had happened in such a short time to change everything? I immediately grabbed my purse and headed over to their house. The drive felt like it took forever. but I needed to see for myself. I arrived, and the scene that met me when I stepped inside the front door made my heart sink. The living room was quiet, but it was the silence that screamed. Susan was sitting on the couch, her hands in her lap, her face pale and swollen from crying. She didn't even look up when I walked in. I could feel her pain in the air, heavy and thick. "Mom," she whispered, barely able to look me in the eye. "He doesn't want her. He doesn't want the baby." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. At first, I thought maybe she was just upset. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But when I looked at the broken glass on the floor, the sign of an argument that had gotten out of control, the weight of what she said sank in. Gregory, my son, the boy I raised, was turning his back on his family over the fact that Susan was having a girl. "She's carrying a girl, Mom," Susan whispered through her tears. "He says he wants a son to carry on the family name. And I can't give him that." I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of it all. The words sounded so foreign coming from my own son. A girl wasn't enough. It didn't matter that she was carrying his child, his flesh and blood. The fact that the baby was a girl seemed to outweigh everything else. The pain Susan felt in that moment was clear. It wasn't just the heartbreak of being rejected by her husband. It was the crushing weight of society's expectations. A society that valued male heirs over the love and worth of a daughter. I felt torn. My first instinct was to support my son, to somehow fix this mess he had made. He was my boy, after all, but in the same breath, I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort Susan. She needed me now, and Gregory's actions had hurt her more than I could have imagined. I wanted to believe that Gregory was just having a rough time, that maybe he'd come around, but deep down, I knew this was something deeper. This wasn't just about the baby. It was about something much bigger, his pride, his ego, and the expectations that had been placed on him since he was born. I started to wonder what kind of man my son was becoming. Would he really throw away his family for something as shallow as carrying on a name? Could a woman never be enough in his eyes? "Mom, I don't know what to do," Susan said, her voice breaking again. "I don't know if I can stay in a marriage with someone who doesn't even want me or our daughter." I held her in my arms, doing my best to reassure her, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. This was about a family, a future, and what Gregory had chosen to prioritize. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about how quickly everything had changed. I tried calling Gregory a few times, but he wouldn't answer. Part of me wanted to scream at him for being so heartless, for letting pride get in the way of something so pure. That night, after Gregory's words hit me like a hammer, I made up my mind. I couldn't let Susan go through this alone. She was already hurting enough, losing the love and support of her husband, the father of her child. The last thing she needed was to face the world on her own, with no one to stand beside her. I didn't even think twice. I packed a bag for her, grabbed a few of her things, and told her we were going to my house. "You're safe here, Susan," I said, trying to sound strong, though I could feel my own heart breaking. "You don't have to worry about anything. We'll figure this out." Susan was too quiet, too numb to say much. I could see the pain in her eyes, and I knew she was barely holding it together. As we loaded her things into the car, I could tell she felt like she was walking away from everything. Her marriage, her life. It was all falling apart in front of her. But I wasn't about to let her face it all alone. We didn't talk much during the drive back to my place. I kept my hands firmly on the wheel, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. How could Gregory do this to her? To their child? A girl. He rejected them both because she wasn't a son. It made no sense, but I knew I had to focus on what I could do now. I needed to be there for Susan. When we got to my house, I showed her the guest room, made sure she had everything she needed. I didn't want her to feel like a guest in her own home, but that's how it felt. She was my daughter-in-law, but now she was more like a daughter to me than ever. I had to take care of her the way I would have done if she were my own flesh and blood. Susan didn't say much that night. She didn't sleep much either. I could hear her softly crying in the other room. I just let her be. I knew that sometimes there's nothing you can say to make someone feel better. But being there, letting them know they're not alone, that's the most important thing. As the days passed, it became clear that Gregory wasn't going to be the one to step up. His calls were few and far between, and they were filled with excuses. Susan's heartbreak was obvious. She didn't just lose her husband, she lost her future. She wasn't sure what would happen next or how she was going to raise this baby on her own. But she wasn't alone anymore. I was here for her, and I wasn't going to let her down. But there was another side to this. I could already feel the stares, the whispers from the neighbors. It's a small town, and everyone seems to know everyone's business. I could sense the judgment every time I went out to get groceries or walked down the street. I knew they were talking. They saw Susan move in. They heard about the divorce. But you know what? I didn't care. Let them talk. I didn't care what they thought. Gregory had turned his back on his own family. That was on him, not us. I wasn't going to let his mistakes tear us apart. I was going to stand by Susan no matter what anyone else thought. She was my family, and I was going to protect her. When I thought about how much she was suffering, it made me even more determined. Gregory had shattered their lives, but I wasn't going to let him take away her future. I would fight for her, fight for the child she was carrying, and fight to make sure she knew that no matter what happened, she wasn't alone. Not now. Not ever. 3 years had passed, and a lot had changed. Susan and I had built a life together, just the two of us, and of course, Lily. She was growing up fast. At 3, she was already a little firecracker, full of energy, always asking questions, and running around. I never thought I'd be raising my granddaughter, but now it felt like she was always meant to be with us. Her smile, her laughter filled the house with so much warmth, and I couldn't imagine life any other way. I watched Susan blossom into the strong, independent woman I knew she had always been. When she first moved in, she was broken, her self-esteem shattered, questioning everything she thought she knew about love and family. But over time, I saw her regain her confidence. She got a job, started making plans for the future, and most importantly, she started to heal. She gave Lily all the love and attention she could, and I did everything I could to support them both. I couldn't help but feel proud of Susan. She was facing a situation that no one should have to face, but she was doing it with grace and strength. The kind of strength I hoped my son would have shown, but never did. Gregory? He hadn't really made much effort to reconnect. After the divorce, he called a couple of times, but the conversations were brief and filled with anger. He didn't apologize for what he'd done. Instead, he blamed Susan for everything, as if she were the one who had turned their lives upside down. I couldn't understand how he could still carry that much anger in him. It was like he couldn't see how wrong he'd been, how much pain he had caused, not just to Susan, but to his own family. Every now and then, I'd hear from mutual friends that Gregory was doing fine, that he was still the same ambitious, driven man he'd always been. But I didn't know if I believed it. It felt like the man I once knew, the man who would have done anything for his family, had disappeared that day he walked away from Susan and Lily. It was like all of his love and loyalty had been conditional, based on something as shallow as having a son. And that thought broke my heart every time I allowed myself to really think about it. I tried to be understanding. I tried to keep in mind that he was my son, and maybe he was just struggling with his own demons. But as the years went by, I found it harder to forgive him. He hadn't even tried to reach out to Lily. Not once. And that hurt me more than I cared to admit. How could a father turn his back on his own child? How could he justify rejecting the beautiful little girl who never asked for any of this? I'd watch Susan hold Lily close and think about how much she had sacrificed, how much she had given up. She had given up the life she imagined she would have, one with a partner, a family united. But she never complained. She loved Lily fiercely and made sure she knew every day that she was wanted and loved, no matter what her father did. It wasn't easy, but Susan had a heart big enough to carry it all. And then there was me. I loved my son. He was still my child, and part of me still wanted to believe he would come to his senses. But every time he called, or every time someone mentioned him, I couldn't help but wonder if the man I had raised had changed forever. Was he still capable of loving his family? Was it fear of being a father to a girl that had caused him to break everything? Or was this something deeper, a flaw I had never seen before? I didn't know the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. The Gregory the first raised would never have made the choice he made. And the longer he stayed away, the more I feared that the man I once knew was gone, lost to his own pride and fear. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where everything seems to be moving in slow motion. I was sitting on the porch, enjoying a rare quiet moment, when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor stopping by, or maybe a delivery. But when I opened the door, I saw Gregory standing there. He didn't look like the same man I remembered. His posture was slouched, his face weary, like life had finally caught up with him. He used to walk in here with so much confidence, always dressed sharply in his business suits, acting like he had everything under control. But today, there was none of that arrogance. No sharp clothes, no cocky smile. Just a man who looked like he'd been through the ringer. I never thought I'd see him here, in my doorway, after everything that had happened. For a moment, I stood there completely still, trying to process what I was seeing. Was this real? After 3 years of silence, after all the pain he had caused, here he is on my doorstep, asking for what? Forgiveness? Closure? I wasn't sure. Gregory spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've come to apologize," he said, his words slow, as if he wasn't sure how they would be received. "I've made mistakes, and I want to see my daughter." I could feel my heart drop into my stomach. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all the anger, all the hurt, all the years of silence, he is here, acting like everything could be fixed with a few words. As if time could just erase the damage done. But could I really turn him away? Could I really shut the door on my son after all this time? I looked at Gregory again. His eyes were tired, filled with regret. But was it enough? Was this really an apology? Or was it just another attempt to fix his mistakes without taking responsibility for the pain he had caused? Was he truly sorry for what he did, or was he just looking for a way to ease his conscience? I didn't know what to think. I wanted to feel relief, to feel like some weight had been lifted, but all I felt was confusion. For a moment, I thought about closing the door right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but I knew I needed to hear what they had to say, even if it was just to get closure. "Come in," I said, my voice a little unsteady. "But if you're here to see Lily, you'll need to explain everything to her." As he stepped inside, I could feel my heart pounding. Was I doing the right thing? Could I trust that this apology was real, or was it just another way for Gregory to control the situation? I didn't know, but I had to find out. The silence in the room was thick as Gregory stood there, his head down, hands fidgeting in his pockets. It had been 3 years, and yet here we were, him standing in front of me again, asking for something he didn't deserve. "I know I don't deserve to see her," Gregory started, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. He wasn't the confident businessman I once knew. This Gregory was worn down, broken in ways I hadn't expected. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want to do something for her. For Lily. I've set up a trust fund for her education, for when she's ready to go to college. I want to put money in it every month, just for her. You don't have to see me. She never has to know it's from me until she's old enough. Please, Mom, just let me do this. Let me provide for her future. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what he was saying. A trust fund. It sounded so easy, so simple. He wanted to buy his way back into Lily's life without actually being a part of it. Could I allow him to contribute to Lily's future without giving him access to her life? There was a part of me that wanted to say yes, to take the money, and not make him suffer any longer. After all, it would help Lily. A full education, free of debt. What mother wouldn't want that for her grandchild? But then I remembered everything. How easily Gregory had walked away from his own flesh and blood. How quickly he had rejected Susan for no reason other than the gender of the child. Could I really accept money from him, knowing it was just a way for him to ease his conscience? I looked at him, trying to decide. Gregory, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the decision. You can't just come in here with a check and think that fixes everything. You don't get to buy your way back into our lives. This isn't about money. This is about you showing up, being present, not just for Lily, but for your family. And you're still not doing that. Gregory stepped back, clearly hurt, but I wasn't finished. No, I don't want your money. You don't get to buy a clear conscience with something like that. You've abandoned us, Gregory. You've abandoned her. Susan and I have done everything we can to give Lily the love and security she needs. We don't need your guilt money to keep going. She needs a father, not someone who pops in with a check every month to make himself feel better. It felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders as I spoke those words, but deep down, I knew that saying no would not make everything right. It wouldn't heal the wound Gregory had left behind, and it wouldn't change the fact that he was still her father, even if he wasn't there when it mattered most. But then, as I looked at his tired face, I felt a different kind of pull. He wasn't the same man who had walked away. I saw the regret in his eyes, the weariness of someone who had lost more than he was willing to admit. Was it enough? Was it enough for him to try and make things right with a gesture like this? I'm not asking for forgiveness, Mom, Gregory said, his voice soft, barely above a whisper. I'm asking for a chance to help her. I don't expect anything else. Just let me do this one thing for her. Please. I felt torn in two. A part of me wanted to protect Susan and Lily at all costs, to keep them from ever having to experience that kind of hurt again. But then there was another part of me that wanted to do what was best for Lily's future. She didn't ask for this mess, and she shouldn't have to suffer because of Gregory's mistakes. I took a deep breath, thinking about all the pain I'd seen Susan go through, all the nights I'd spent comforting her, and all the times I'd watched Lily grow without her father around. Could I let Gregory back in, even in this small way, just for Lily's sake? I looked at him, my heart heavy. All right, Gregory, I said, my voice steady but firm. For Lily's sake, and for hers alone, you can make the deposits. But let me be clear. This changes nothing between us. You don't get to use this as a way to buy your way back into her life. This doesn't buy forgiveness. It doesn't give you access to her. It's a gift for her future, and that is all it will ever be. Gregory didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, staring at me with a mixture of relief and sadness. He nodded slowly, as if understanding the weight of my words. Thank you, he whispered, and with that, he turned and walked out of the house. I stood there in the doorway, watching him leave. I wasn't sure if I had made the right decision. There was no anger left in me, just sadness. Deep, aching sadness. Not for myself, but for him. He'd left so much behind, not just in his family, but in his own heart. I couldn't ignore the look in his eyes when he left, like he'd lost something he would never get back. But what hurt even more was the realization that it wasn't just his loss. It was his choice. Susan, Lily, and I were okay. We had our life, our small but beautiful life together. Susan had found her strength. She had rebuilt herself, and watching her do that every day filled me with pride. I knew she was stronger than she had been before, not just for herself, but for Lily. And for me, too. We had our family, the love we had fought to protect, and peace, the kind of peace that comes from healing, from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard. I couldn't say that I had forgiven Gregory. Maybe that would come with time. Maybe not. But I knew I had to keep moving forward for Susan and for Lily. But still, I couldn't stop wondering. Had I made the right choice? It's a question I'll be thinking about for a long time. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have taken the money knowing it could change your granddaughter's life? Or would you have rejected it and keeping your family's dignity intact? I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done? Did I protect my family, or did I just hold on to the past too tightly? If you've been following this story, I want to thank you for being a part of it. Please like this video if it made you think, share it with others who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories. We all go through moments of tough decisions, and sometimes the hardest part is knowing what's truly right. Don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on her Kindle Stories.